All right. And with that said, welcome everybody to the second of our Comic Creators Talks. This is a series of three, and this is number two in that series. We're going to be talking about superheroes today. Just want to introduce myself here. I am Joe Pasculo. I am one of the YA librarians at the 53rd Street branch, Midtown Manhattan, and I'm here with a couple of my colleagues, friends, Sabresia Jones, Whitney Davidson Rhodes. They're going to be talking to you guys soon, but you guys want to introduce yourselves first?
Yeah. Hi. Hi, everyone. My name is Sabresia Jones, and I am the young adult librarian at the Pelham Parkway Venice branch.
Good afternoon. My name is Whitney Davidson Rhodes. I am the Associate Manager for Young Adult Programs and Services at the Central branch at NYPL.
And we've got a pretty nice set of panelists here. They're going to be getting to us in a little bit. We've got Tim Seeley, we've got Kyle Higgins, we've got Sean Lewis, and we've got Andrew McLean. So, superheroes is the name of the game today. But first, I want to thank everybody for being here. Comic Con week. You could be doing anything with your time right now, but you are here at this virtual author event. So, thank you for supporting our authors. Thank you for supporting the library. And now we're going to get to some housekeeping things. Next slide. Oh, there it is. Amazing. All right. So, a couple of housekeeping rules here during the duration of the program. Please keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. There is a microphone right there on the left. You can show or unshow yourself by clicking on the little camcorder there that says stop video. There's other things you're able to do. You can raise your hand. You can use closed captioning. You can use the chat for questions, and we are going to do our best to getting to as many of the Q&A as possible. We've got a really great discussion today, and we definitely want to give our authors some time, but we also want to give you attendees some time as well. So definitely any questions that come up, use that Q&A box. And yeah, Zoom is pretty universal now. I think we all know how to use it, but just a couple of things we want you to know in advance. So, how to get books here at the New York Public Library? Well, there are a couple of things you are able to do. You can use the shelf help, even though it's not on the slide right here. You can use the shelf help option, or you can log into the website nypl.org to pick out books, and we'll place them on that hold shelf for you at your neighborhood branch. You don't know your neighborhood branch, give us a call. We will figure it out. Just a few other things. There is a new policy shift, not really new. It's kind of 2 years old now, but the library has eliminated all fines from the patrons' accounts. So everybody has a clean slate. There are no more late fees. So if you do give a book back a couple of days late, that's okay. We won't ding you for anything. You can get ebooks as well. So if you don't want to come into the branch to read physical books and you prefer to read things digitally, that's okay, because the library has a number of options. We have Simply E, which is available for Apple and Android. Yeah, I think that's about it for this slide. All right, so there are a couple other programs that are happening. Some of them are virtual, some of them are in person here. So we've got a couple of author talks with Jessica Cara, E.L. Shen. Andre Fertino, rather, is going to be in person tomorrow at the 53rd Street Library. That's an after-hours talk. We have a book launch event with PJ Caldas. That's on October 18th. And then a couple of other author talks as well with Laura Stephen, Cynthia Murphy, Genevieve Valentine. So we definitely love it when the authors do these sorts of programs and kind of brings them closer to our patrons. So thank you to everybody in the panel today for your time. It really does mean a lot. And I think that is about it. So I'm going to turn it over to Sabresia and to Whitney.
Thank you, Joe, and hello, everyone, again. Good afternoon. And I have the extreme pleasure of introducing our guests, our special guests today. So we will be having a very great conversation talking about superheroes with Tim Seeley, Kyle Higgins, Andrew McLean, and Sean Lewis. So thank you guys for joining us so much for this afternoon.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So oh, great, thank you. So I just want to give a bio for each of our panelists. Tim Seeley, who graciously decided to step in the last minute for Tom King. So we are very, very excited to have him here.
I'm
So
the only one in color too. I'm very
oh, yeah, that's what like is special, is like you stand out. So Tim Seeley is one of those slash people, a writer slash artist. He has drawn a number of different comic book series, including G.I. Joe, Halloween, Wildcats, and Ant-Man and Wasp. His writing work includes Nightwing, Money Shot, Injustice versus Masters of the Universe, the critically acclaimed Revival, and the New York Times bestselling Hack Slash. He resides in Chicago, Illinois, with his wife, daughter, and 80s action figure collection. And then we have Kyle Higgins, who is the #1 New York Times bestselling author, best known for his work on DC Comics Batman titles, as well as his critically acclaimed reinventions of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers for Boom Studios and Ultraman for Marvel Comics, Radiant Black, which is part of the Massiverse, which is my favorite universe, is Kyle's fourth series for Image Comics. And then we have Sean Lewis, who is the co-creator and writer of Image Comics Saints, The Few, and Coyotes. His plays have won the Kennedy Center's Rosa Parks Award, the National New Play Network Smith Prize, the Barrymore Award, the William Inge Fellowship, and more. His work has been screened at the Tribeca Film Festival and has been heard on NPR's This American Life. And then finally, we have Andrew MacLean, who is an American comic book creator, and he's a creator, artist, and writer of Headlopper, the Diamond Gem award-winning series that's published by Image Comics. Apocalyptic Girl, an aria for the end times, that published in 2015 and 2020, is his post-apocalyptic sci-fi graphic novel, which is published by Dark Horse Comics and was nominated for a YALSA Award. Published in more than 7 different languages, Andrew has also worked for Marvel, DC, Warner Brothers, Hasbro, etc. on and a variety of projects in both comics and animation. In addition, Andrew is a co-founder and creative director of the lifestyle brand Laser Wolf Attack, where art and apparel meet the street. Andrew likes coffee, whiskey, and heavy metal, and enjoys traveling with his wife, Erin, and their adorable pup, Lola. So with that extensive repertoire from each of our guests, we are really excited to have everyone here this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I wanted to get, thank you. So I wanted to get started. Well, I did introduce everyone, but if you wanted to give each of you, if you wanted to introduce like your most recent title and or a body of work and a brief description of that book so we can get started.
Sure, I'll hop in. I'm mostly known for my comic at Image Comics called Headlopper, but my most recent work is I'm currently writing the Godzilla series at IDW called Godzilla War for Humanity, with the great artist Jake Smith. And then I just had another kaiju book just come out called Snarlagon that I wrote and drew, and that one's kind of lighter in tone. I kind of call it like it's like Godzilla if like Wes Anderson wrote it or something. It's kind of goofy and silly. So yeah, that's my most recent stuff, and then I'll be moving back to Headlopper early next year.
I'm Sean Lewis. In comics, I'm probably at this point most known for the work I've been doing on King Spawn and Scorched for McFarlane Productions, which are like expansions of the Spawn universe, which was one of the original books that launched Image Comics. So I've just finished up like runs on both of those books.
Kyle, go ahead.
I'm Kyle Higgins. I'm the co-creator and writer of Radiant Black, as well as No One. And then I creative direct my little company, Black Market Narrative, which is a creative collective. And we do the Massiverse, which is our little creator-owned superhero universe at Image Comics. Inferno Girl Red, which is very much on topic for any sort of YA superhero discussion. Radiant Black, Rogue Sun, The Dead Lucky, Cowl, No One, Radiant Red, Radiant Pink, and then our super massive one-shots we do yearly. I like to describe Radiant Black as Power Rangers with adult problems. So we try to do very contemporary superhero stories that are very much the world outside your window, dealing with a lot of the, in my case with Radiant Black, a lot of the kind of millennial issues that so many of us who were kind of from the last generation promised the lies of the American dream now have to navigate with crazy credit card interest rates and the reality that we are never buying a home, all put through the aesthetics of our childhood. That certainly comes out of my time doing Power Rangers, but also kind of my love of tokusatsu that developed doing Power Rangers and Ultraman and things of that nature. So it all gets kind of funneled back into the work.
And I'm Tim Seeley. Since this is Image and superheroes, I guess I can plug Local Man, which just came out. Local Man is a superhero story about a former superhero forced to move back to his hometown and investigate a crime, but he can't use his powers or his costume. And it's the Gen X version of what Kyle just described. So same anxieties, slightly different generation.
And they all sound amazing. I do want to read Local Man, Tim, because I did, when I looked you up, it was like the most recent, and I read the synopsis. I was like, I need to ask Chloe about this. I need to get this one. So since this panel is dealing with superheroes, and every one of you have created your own type of superhero, whether it's one that's already been in the world for many years, or you have created your own, we wanted to ask, like, what is one superhero you worked on or created, and what would you change about them, and what would you keep the same?
We might have to do a call on people because we don't have a roll of order, so we just all stare at each other until something.
Yeah,
That's pretty true. You have an overly polite group of writers who want to talk to each other.
We roll over each
it's
other.
New York Comic Con week. We're all exhausted. I can touch all the walls of the room I'm in at the hotel right now. That's how tiny we are. It's a good thing it's a wide lens. That's a really good question. I'll jump in first, I guess. Tim, you can relate to this one. I'll talk work for hire actually to start. So Tim and I are Nightwing brothers in that we both worked on some pretty significant runs on Nightwing, who is my all-time favorite character. And when I was doing the book, one of the things that I found myself bumping up against quite a bit was the same problem that I think previous Nightwing writers probably had when they were building him out as a solo title, which is when you look back at like that Chuck Dixon, Scott McDaniel run of the 90s, which is kind of like the first really big modern Nightwing series, at least the one I grew up on. And I'm not talking Teen Titans, I'm talking like in his own solo series. The drama of that book is predominantly built on Dick and Bruce's relationship and the idea that as their relationship ebbs and flows, so does the points of drama. But the problem with building a character on a relationship like that is that when he inevitably gets on good terms with Bruce, the book tends to stall out. And I think that it kind of like opened my eyes to this little bit of this problem. But it's also it's also like kind of an opportunity. And it happens not on purpose when Marv Wolfman creates Nightwing, but because of the history of the character. If you had to define Nightwing in one or two sentences, what's the first thing you would say? Used to be Robin, used to be Robin. So when the character starts that way, it becomes hard to find the path forward that doesn't just keep him constantly reliant on that relationship with Bruce and Batman. The Winter Soldier is a really good example of how you can do it differently. Certainly there wasn't nearly as much material with Bucky when Ed and Steve Epting brought him back in 2005 to become the Winter Soldier. But if you talked about the origin of the Winter Soldier, the fact that he used to be Bucky is like the third or fourth thing that you could say. And so a lot of what I tried to do on my run, and it was a complicated time to do it at DC, was kind of centered on this idea of like, how could you build, if they would let you, how could you build a Nightwing that wasn't reliant on Batman, even down to the core of the character? And so I really settled on this idea that he catches people when they fall. Like that's what, he's an acrobat, grew up in a circus, his parents literally fell to death. And so that kind of became this like centering mantra for me with the character. But it ultimately all circles back to like, yes, but what's his relationship with the Bat family, which should be a component. But I do think sometimes it ends up a little limiting because the reason the character is popular and known is also the reason why oftentimes some writers find that they find a ceiling on what they're able to kind of do and how they're able to push them in different directions.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle's hitting at a thing that I think is difficult with writing superheroes in general, is like it's what I imagine it's like to like write Friends in a way, is like the characters can only change so much before the fan base and you know the engine of the industry of the market of DC or Marvel starts to go like, wait, what are you doing? Or even on Spawn, you know, that one's a little bit weirder. Like because I'm working directly with Todd, like the guy who created it is also basically the person giving me notes on it. Like it's a little, you can see there's an editor and there's like a history where we both can disagree about like, I think Marv Wolfman meant this. With Todd, it's like, Todd, like, trust me, I did this. And I'm like, but I do think like that's a constant tension of writing a superhero, is like, how much invention can I do, especially around the core elements of a character, if that's what a character is known for. Those ceilings I think can come really fast. Like once you start pushing into them, for sure. But
yeah, well, one of the things I always think about it, and I'll use the example of having worked on Ant-Man and Wasp, which is that in comics, a lot of things that are you know, people think of comic books as being the home of superheroes, which is unfortunate because there's so many other genres. But also the bummer is that superheroes in comics are less mainstream than the films are. So like Ant-Man as a movie is a huge hit. And having worked on Ant-Man and Wasp, I can tell you it wasn't a huge hit as a comic. So it's always this sort of confusing tension, is that in comics there's very much a desire for the fan base that exists to have you stay doing these superheroes and to keep them, as these guys are saying, sort of a limited. They don't want you to change them too much. But in comics, the mainstream is manga. It's not superheroes. So, you know, it's a restraining thing. I don't know where it comes. I don't know why that we missed the boat on that. You know, all of us who were working in comics in the late 90s, early 2000s, like, we told you we have to do something other than superheroes, and then we didn't, and someone else did, and now they're reaping the benefits, you know. And it's a very weird time to, I think, be doing something which is considered so mainstream, but which is clearly not.
I would say I did one very short story on Wonder Woman, but I didn't spend a lot of time with her, so I wouldn't say it would change much. But I would say at the time I wanted to bring a golden age or silver age, villain back to life. That was something I wanted to do. So I recreated this character, Hypnota, and I cast her, instead of being like a fortune teller type character, I made her the head of a cult, because I think cults are really fascinating. And so it was fun doing that. However, I think Wonder Woman has so much potential to be such a cool like fantasy hero. If I was to do it again, I wouldn't change the character as much as I would have done. I'd set a story in like a fantasy world, something closer to Headlopper. That said, I can speak in depth about Headlopper since I've done 1,000 pages or whatever. So if I was to like change something about Norgal, the main character there, I think I would just plot out his morality in greater detail. When I started it, I was like, I'm going to do 20 pages, self-publish it, and I'll be done. And then it became 65 pages, and then Image picked it up, and it just kept going. And I think the result works fine, where Norgal starts as this kind of sword for hire. He's very selfish. He has no like greater desire to help others. but through the people he meets along the way, he, like, particularly this character Zanya, really inspires him to be like, all right, like, there are people with great power, gods and wizards and monsters that, you know, prey on the weaker or whatever. So eventually he kind of learns it's like kind of morality to take his strength um, and use it for good. But I think if I just could, I would have plotted it out more from the beginning. It's very much a story that I just felt out as I went. I always just say it's kind of just shooting from the hip. And then, like, once you get into deadlines, you're just like, you got to pump it out, and you don't have much time to really make a big map. So had I known that I'd be lucky enough to do it for a long time, I probably would have planned instead of just being like, all right, what's the cool stuff for the characters to do? Hopefully that doesn't come across in the story, but that was where I was coming from.
I've got one more to piggyback on all of that. This is more of a genre thing, I think. I wish that we could go back and condition both companies and readers to expect endings. I wish characters and franchises would end. I wish we would allow them to. And I think, like, that's one of the things that I really find so amazing about a lot of the tokusatsu stuff, Kamen Rider, Super Sentai. They have finite missions most of the time. Mm-hmm. And so this idea of superheroes that exist to fight this endless battle while also serving these corporate masters that don't and can't let Batman ever end does create this kind of unsustainable storytelling engine. And one of the things that I really pride myself, all of us that do our Massiverse books, we like to take really big swings. And the reason for that is twofold. One, it makes for more exciting books. And two, we feel an immense responsibility. If we're going to do not only a creator-owned book at Image, but a superhero book at Image, you better bring it. Because there's so much stuff on the stands. There's so much great superhero content in so many different mediums. You need to be doing something different and interesting and pushing things into kind of uncharted waters, even if you're playing off of established things. So, like, I mean, Radiant Black, not to spoil it, but like we kill the main character in issue 4 and the annoying best friend takes over, right? And so where it goes from there and how it develops is actually what the book is really about. And now we're in the midst of this big event called the Catalyst War. For the last 2 years, the book has actually been this secret two-hander that I've been building. And then we gave it over to the readers to vote on who would actually be able to maintain the powers permanently. And instead of giving you the answer at the start of the event, we published 2 different endings under the A and B cover, and we didn't tell people. And now for the next 6 months, that's actually what the secret of what the event is. It's an event told across timelines. We're running 2 parallel universe stories where one character is Radiant Black and the other character is Radiant Black, and they diverge with 2 different art teams, and they're both necessary for what the event ends up becoming. That's something that no one's really done before in comics, and definitely not in superhero comics, but it's something that I think that's why the stuff we've been doing has resonated for the people it's been resonating with, is because we're not afraid to, we're just not afraid to do things a little different and really, we risk a lot with our characters and their journeys, and there's a plan for where everyone's heading. And a lot of times in, licensed comics, and Marvel and DC I would include as licensed comics in this day and age, like that's not really the way it usually works.
Kyle's making me mourn so many rejected pitches at DC and Marvel.
They never would have let you do it.
Oh, they haven't. For sure. No, like it's interesting. There's a level of, it's fun. Like what you're talking about too is like I think we all got into it from a level of just wild joy of reading comics as a kid and how unprecious they were. That like crazy stuff. There was a point where Captain America was like a werewolf. Like, there was times where it would just go like really insane when I was a kid. And I desperately missed that.
I had this book that Tim remembers probably because Tim, you were in the room when I pitched this idea during a Batman Eternal meeting. Remember, I was like, I was joking. I was like, I want to see I want to read Gordon and Son, where it's Commissioner Gordon and his serial killer's son solving cold case murders together. And we all kind of, it'd be like Hannibal and Gotham City. We all kind of laughed. And Snyder and I both looked up at each other and we both had the same thought, like, that'd be a really great book. So I tried to get that book made for like 5 or 6 years through different versions. Ultimately, Tim Sale and I were going to do it at DC. And apparently they just don't like printing money, because while it was going to be a spiritual sequel to Long Halloween and Dark Victory, it just ultimately didn't happen because of politics. So over the years, there was something to the core that I really liked about it. And it's changed very, very much since. But after Radiant Black, suddenly I realized I know how to do that and do it really contemporary. That is both a commentary and a satire on our modern media and the news, politics, entertainment cycle and churn that we all find ourselves in day to day, put through the lens of the most popular thing in pop culture in America, which is superheroes. So it's not like the original pitch at all anymore, but it became something much bigger and more ambitious, and I think much more timely. 2 of the characters in the book are reporters that are covering this accountability killing movement in Pittsburgh. And the new media division of their failing paper talks them into starting a podcast to chronicle their investigation, like a Sarah Koenig serial. We make that podcast every month with Rachel Lee Cook and Patton Oswalt, Todd Stashwick, Yuri Lowenthal, all voicing characters from the book. And so the book is actually very much a cross-media project where you read the issue, then you listen to the free episode, and they go hand in hand. As they name people as suspects in the book, spoiler alert, or sorry, on the podcast, those people start getting killed in the book. DC never in a million years would have let us do something like that. They're not set up for something like that. But when you're trying to push the boundaries on these things and really get back to the tenets of what made us love superhero comics, is what Sean is saying, when we thought anything could happen and they were exciting, like, I do think that stuff is still possible, but it's way more possible when it's stuff that we as creators own and control.
Which is why Andrew's comic, where he lamented not planning anything, is how you're supposed to do comics.
Yeah.
Don't plan it. Just riff, man. If you surprise yourself, you surprise the reader.
That's true.
As long as you're not boring, man, that's all that, yes. Like, it, people are there for, like, people want new. Tim, you're talking about manga, like, half of why manga is so amazing to me is because how much fun it is and how crazy it can get, you know. And I feel like we miss out on that a lot in a lot of comics these days.
No, we definitely see that at the library, because manga is the one that's reigning supreme. And check out and the ones that disappear or have legs and just walk out the door. But everything, yeah, grow legs. But everything you guys said is, I think, why I don't read as much DC and Marvel comics as much, is because it just became the same old thing. And I guess that's what appealed to what with your the massive verse that was created with you, Kyle, and also with the other great comics that are Image Comics has created. This is not a plug. This is all the truth.
Buy our books. Like, we'll take all the plugs you can give.
But it's why it's so appealing. It's because it's different and it's new, and I never know what to expect. And I think that is like what is the appeal of superheroes. But you do have the juggernauts, DC and Marvel, and hopefully they will not come after me because they are juggernauts, and I don't have any money, Warner Brothers and Disney. So, but I did want to definitely ask, because they both have these universes. You have the Marvel universe, and then you have the DC Comics universe, and they're all interconnected. And I think this leads into my next question, like what makes a good interconnected universe? And I think you did touch a little bit on it, like how does a reader become interested and more intrigued in any universe, and it could be DC, Massive, Marvel, just any universe where there's a multiple amount of characters. Like, how can a reader become more intrigued and more interested in the story?
Tim has a great point that I've seen him talk about quite a bit, which is that a lot of people like to talk about jumping on points in comics, but I think every one of us probably started. I mean, Tim, I'm literally doing your bit, but we all started with a random issue of, you know, X-Men 648 or Amazing Spider-Man Part 4 of a crossover that was in 3 other titles before it, right? You jump in and you find something that is interesting there and that you latch onto, whether it's a character, whether it's an idea, whether it's whatever. And then all of those little additive bits you start to thread together yourself. Now, I think like what the original Marvel universe was is a pretty good example of when it was pretty small initially in the early 60s. Like Spider-Man would swing by in the background of a panel. It's like, oh, I wonder what he's doing this, you know, in a panel of, you know, the Fantastic Four, and an editor's caption, like, see where Spider-Man's going, you know, over in Amazing Spider-Man #2. At a certain point, it becomes critical mass, though, and there's so many titles that is just not. You end up in the situation that we had in the 90s where, like I just quipped, like there were Spider-Man events in the mid 90s where it was like Part 1 was in Amazing Spider-Man, Part 2 was in Spectacular Spider-Man, Part 3 was in Web of Spider-Man, and so on and so forth. With the Massiverse stuff, we made a very, very conscious effort, and I have to give a lot of credit to Michael Basuto, who edits and designs all the books. Michael and I made a very conscious effort that no book should be reliant on anyone else's. Like, we didn't want the problem that actually it's a thing that happened in Spawn. Like the original origin for Spawn, Al Simmons is killed by who is it? Chapel. Al Simmons is killed by Chapel, who is a Youngblood character. I don't know that Todd could go back and do that origin again, showing Chapel, because I don't know where the rights to Chapel lie anymore. So what we did with our books was I told everyone that came in to do stuff, like, everyone pick a different city. Everyone build out their own title in a different city, not reliant on anyone else's world or intellectual property. And so Radiant Black is set in Chicago and Northwest Indiana because it's me. And Rogue Sun is set down in New Orleans. The Deadlucky's in San Francisco. No One's in Pittsburgh. And then you don't have to read anything you don't want to read. If you like Radiant Black, you don't have to read any of the other titles. If you like Rogue Sun, you don't have to read Radiant Black. Once a year, we do a 50-page one-shot special called Supermassive, where the characters cross over. You don't have to read anything before that either. We design those to be self-contained while also being additive if you've read everything else. It's kind of a little bit of a tightrope walk, but what it's done is it's kept everything really accessible for us. And so readers can find as much as they want to find, and they can go down that rabbit hole as deep as they want, but there's no pressure for them to have to take that deep plunge.
I think a big part of it is just part of the delivery system, which is that in the era that Kyle's talking about, you know, all the way up into maybe 20 years ago, comics came out as monthly format books, and so there was, you know, you read them once and they were off the shelf, and then they disappeared into a back issue box somewhere, you know, to be collected by somebody else. And the idea now that we have these evergreen, essentially trade paperbacks, is what you stock the library for this stuff. It's much harder to do interconnected stuff that feels important, because that moment has passed. It's not immediate. It's now, the interest of it is, what does the moment one character meets another one tell you about the characters you love? That's the only thing it has value of. So the way I think Marvel and DC are able to do it now is, you know, when you read something that's evergreen, like Batman Dark Knight Returns, and you see him interact with Superman, his interaction with Superman tells you about both of them. And it's no longer about like, hey, the universe is this giant connected, evolving place that I have to keep up with every month or I'll miss something. And now it's, how does this define these iconic characters for me by other iconic characters? You know, so it's much harder to do now because of that. I mean, it's you know, do you have a take that tells you what you need to know about Spider-Man with Fantastic Four that will survive on the shelf in a library for the next 10 years, which is a very different job.
And for me, I agree that endings are important, like to have stakes, to have, but also like for me, and I try to do this in Headlopper as much as possible, is I try to create just kind of just general satisfaction. So each issue I want it to connect to the next, but also again, if you've read that, you get a beginning and middle and end. I try not to, just use cliffhangers and other tricks to make you go check out this next thing to move you forward as much as possible, to the point of how many of us check something out for the first time and it's, in the middle of a story. I always think that I want every little piece that I create to stand on its own as much as possible. So, the further you get into, Headlopper, the more starts relying on stuff that happened in the past. But for quite a long time, it's just each one's a standalone adventure. So I try to make everything be chronological. Like you're going to enjoy it the most if you read it in order. But since we don't always have that luxury, I try to give everybody something very satisfying, regardless where they step in or how big of a chunk. I just want them to walk away kind of happy. Like that was fun, not just like, oh gosh, I'm so confused. I better read these other things so I know what the heck just happened. I want people to walk away just like with a satisfaction,
Well, a big thing used to be too is that you didn't want to give Spider-Man or Superman an ending because you don't want to deprive the next generation of kids who superhero comics were made for of those characters, right? Like they are universal. They're great. Why would you take Spider-Man away from a kid that could read new stories? But I think the way that's been figured out is Miles Morales. You can end Peter Parker and then give us Miles, and it works. And it's actually probably better for the era, right? It's actually Miles is a better Spider-Man for 2023 than Peter is. So it's been done, and I think those are the things you find success with. But the idea across the board that having these sort of iconic everyone superhero characters, what if you replace Superman with somebody who's not good and is not a story engine and is not interesting, and then you've got a whole generation of kids who don't get that, which is kind of selfish, really. So it's like it's a tough line, I think, and that's part of what this transition that we're having for superhero comics right now is about.
I think too, I mean, going back to your initial question about the universes, I mean, I think having written John Kent Superman in the for Future State, like what Tim's talking hits for me close to home of like, how do you like introduce the new? But I think in terms of the universes, I think there's also a question of just like tonally how things connect. Like I do wonder as collaborators get further and further removed and editors are working on so many books, like that the further the closeness gets away from the work, I think it's harder for the work to feel united just in general. Like I think when it might be me just like being nostalgic for a world I didn't ever live in of like Marvel bullpens that I hear about. And I'm like, that sounds amazing. I would love a friend next to me at a board who I just talked to. But like I look at some of my books I've done an Image that aren't superhero books. Like I've worked with this artist, Hayden Sherman, really, really closely. Like we've probably done like close to 1,000 pages together on like sci-fi books, Westerns. And weirdly, I'm like, we could make a book where the Western guy shows up with the post-apocalyptic girl and it would feel like a universe because the tonal, it works together because it's like, it's got that same sensibility, even though those books are wildly different, which is like what Cates did with his, I'm going to forget the name of it. What's the book Cates did where like all of his characters show up?
Crossover.
Yeah. It should have been a very obvious title for me to remember, but I sometimes wonder about that too, is that if, as you get like so many different books and so many creators and everyone's far flung and no one's interacting or having camaraderie, how is the universe going to have camaraderie? Like that to me just seems like a very basic.
We can have like this conversation all day. But I did want to get to the question that was just entered into the chat before I pass it off to Whitney to ask the rest of our questions. So Kenny Cruz asks, do you think that this push for different, cooler stories is a desire for more mature stories for us comic fans that grew up wanting the comics to grow up along with us? I feel like the big labels want to maintain the status quo of everyone can get behind this neutral, cool, but sterile.
Okay, I have a strong opinion on this. Okay. I think that a lot of people conflate dark and edgy with complex and sophisticated, and those two things are not the same. They can be. You can do dark and edgy that is sophisticated and complex, but just because you're dark and edgy does not mean you're sophisticated and complex. I think that something like Into the Spider-Verse is funny and has way more heart than 95% of superhero comics out there. And I think people aren't writing all ages stuff as much anymore. And I don't really know why, but I think a lot of times, whether it's the perception amongst creators, like that, of what the market is, or even amongst readers of what they think they want, I don't know. Something changed for me over the last however many years, and I'm just way less interested in writing grimdark superhero stuff. And I don't feel like the market is all that interested in grimdark superhero stuff either.
But I think the base of the question, I think, is kind of interesting, because I think the problem is that the comics grew up, superhero comics grew up the characters to meet the readers, and they shouldn't have. They should have stopped, and they should have made superhero comics, especially Marvel and DC comics, for kids. They should be for smart kids, but they should be for kids. And all those stories that have dark Batman stuff and everything, those should have been other characters. Yeah. Which is why the goal, I think, if we could do this again, it'd be great if Marvel and DC made their books just for kids and people who are, and those characters don't really change. It's the illusion of change, and then we do, if you want adult oriented or changing superheroes, you come over to Image and you buy Local Man, or you buy the Massive Verse, or you buy Spawn, or you buy Hudlopper, because that's where we can change things and we don't ruin anything. Because the problem is exactly what Kyle's saying, is when you make these sort of, dark versions of characters, or you make them grow up, they're no longer interesting to kids. Like, kids don't want to read about Batman that has to do, adult stuff, like boring adult stuff, right? They want to read Batman punches dudes and fights the Joker, and that's what they want. And we've been avoiding giving them that so that we could feel good about making serious art, which is not valuable for those kind of pop characters, really. And that would be the goal. Is if the original idea is that Image would be a place you would go for when you're like, you know what, I've realized that the Marvel superhero characters don't really change, and that's okay. And now I'm going to go buy Spawn, and I will be happy. And that's what we should have been doing.
Yeah, there's kind of an argument to be made that continuity is like the worst thing to happen to superhero comics in that sense. Like, it's a great, there's great aspects of it, but at a certain point, it all becomes like a critical mass. And you think, what's that?
It's a crutch.
Yeah.
Well, I don't really have a dog in the fight, but I think that fun. So many of them are just like boring. I find I felt that way even when I was a kid. Sometimes I'd like read a detective comic. I'm like, why is Batman being a detective this whole time? Why isn't he punching the Joker in the face? I just think whatever age group it is, I want it to be fun. I want it to just fun first, like be sophisticated, like have interesting relationships and have your characters change and stuff, but like fun first. But there are fun comics, just not a lot of them.
We do at the library, we do have like the more geared towards the, what is it, middle grade and younger, Tabrija?
Yeah.
They're just more poppy, chibi style, like the
I think, again, DC has that line where I don't think they call it DC Ink or DC Zoom anymore, but I think they just call it DC for young readers, where I think is what Kyle, you were mentioning, is like they put them in more they take the classic superheroes and they put them in more relatable, like in situations, and I think that's what they're trying to do in that sense.
Those are, so I teach at a college. Those are the superhero comics my kids read. It seems like they're wildly successful, and I really hope they do more of that stuff. you know, because I see those out in the world in Target, and every time I see one, you know, I try to pick it up for my kid who's 4 because she can read the Miles Morales comics that come out that way, and I think those are great. I wish those were uh, sort of the dominating approach to superhero comics from the big two.
Thank you, Kenny, for your question. We have about 10-ish minutes less, a little bit less. So we're gonna kind of flip to some more questions. Know that this might be a Kyle specific, don't mean to alienate the rest of you, but you did mention you seem like a huge, not a huge, that might be an overstatement, but you seem like someone that likes manga and follows it a lot. And you did mention that it's seems to be more popular. And this is, I guess, can be open to all of you as well, but do you see manga in general as a competition? And I guess what are your views on it? And again, for everyone, what are your views on it in general?
I think no, I don't see it as a competition. I see it as a fantastic metric for how much the comic industry is failing. Like, I'm just going to be real. Like, manga did 27 million copies last year. The comic industry couldn't touch that. And for as much as that we you know, you can point to anime being a direct pipeline to manga, we have the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that is not converting people into monthly superhero comics. So something's off there, and I don't know quite what it is. I have some thoughts, but nothing, you know, that, you know, I want to do a deep dive on right now necessarily, I guess. But I personally don't see it as a competition, more so as like, what are we doing as an industry? And this gets into it. This really would get into a larger conversation, the difference between the direct market and the book market and collected editions and price point and things like that too. But something's not working because, I mean, yeah, there's something off in the comics, on the comics side.
On the American side, yeah. I mean, I teach at a college. All my kids read manga. Some of them read American comics, but very few read superhero comics, or at least big two ones. And so, you see the success of stuff, you know, coming into reading manga and being interested in sequential art. And manga is just sequential art. Manga just means comics in Japanese. It's not a different thing. But you see the transition of the readership when they love those comics. They become saga readers, or they become, you know, they'll check out some of Scott Pilgrim, or so there's plenty of Western comics that they're interested in. It is just tough that it's not often the Marvel DC superhero books. And I'm like with Kyle, I don't think of it as competition, but I definitely think it is, you know, they're able to make things cheaper and publish things cheaper and do things that we can't do here. I have to pay for my insurance, so you know, that is built into the cost of the books I have to do. Whereas, you know, that's an entire country of people who have government insurance. So there's a way that they're able to do things for a price point that's very appealing. And now, you know, when they transition into stuff, it's not into superhero books, which, you know, I guess as guys who do, we can all do multiple genres, and you know, it doesn't break my heart not to have them go read. If they read Hack Slash or Local Man, I'm great with that. But you know, obviously, it'd be lovely if there was a book, you know, a Nightwing book that's for young readers, or the ones you're talking about. There's a great one about Raven and Beast Boy that I've seen my kids read all the time, and those are superhero books. They're just superhero books, and they are comics. And so clearly, it can be done. It's just finding support among the mainstream readers who are resistant to change and who hate when you make things for kids, and that's kind of part of the problem too.
Well, I think too, Tim, I think you're touching on a big thing there too. Like, the price point is a huge deal. And I'm not saying comics should be cheaper, because the reality is, like, what they cost is, I mean, we all kill ourselves doing this for not a lot of money because we love it. But when you look at something like Shonen Jump, and what is it, like $2.99 a month to subscribe? And you know, every parent is willing to pay that for if their kids are interested. And suddenly there's so much that those kids can consume. And that's then leading to bookstores. That's then leading, I mean, it really is kind of a pipeline in that way. We couldn't do that in kind of traditional or in Western comics from a price point standpoint for the volume, the amount of material that that they do. But you know, that gets into other conversations about platform and other conversations about format. And so it's, I mean, this is all stuff I'm like super interested in. But
Talk to.
what's up?
We could interview them. We could turn around and interview.
Yeah.
Barely.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you see?
Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, no, this is great. I mean, as librarians, what do you see as far as the entry point for a lot of readers with manga and even Western comics
and superheroes?
Yeah.
As a,
I was not prepared for that.
I think from what I saw before I ascended and left the library, left the branches, I saw that more like older adults were more into like the superheroes. It was like the nostalgia. It was like the Dark Knight, the Flash, who's my favorite superhero. And then kids were more toward teens, because we're teen librarians, we serve teens. We're more into like the Giant Days type series where it's just more slice of life. And then that kind of translates to at least, you know, what's popular now. Jujutsu Kaisen, Chainsaw Man, there's like a level of like those anti-heroes are becoming super popular right now. Tabrija and I were having a conversation in the chat about not caring about, kind of going back to what Andrew said about not caring about what's in order. Like we've had kids check out because things grow legs, we've had kids check out volume 15 and volume 40 of a manga series and not really caring like what that massive story is in between.
That's interesting. That goes against conventional wisdom.
But
I think it's just like, sorry, Whitney. No, like I think it's just like based on if it's there, they'll take it. It's like if it's there, it's like, okay, I don't really care, like if it's compared to volume 1 or volume 15. I've noticed that older readers, they would come up to me as like, oh, do you have volume 1? And I say, sadly, no, you have to go. We can put it on hold for you, or we have a digital copy and you can check it out through there. But younger patrons, they're like, it's there, I don't care. But also, I think with the internet being as big and open to other things to do, they can find ways of getting volume 1, of reading the beginning of the story and catching up. So I think they're more like tech savvy in the sense of finding a way compared to an older patron who's like, well, I'm here, let me see if I can find it. And if not, then I can put it on hold or I can check it out.
Interesting.
Gotta
I
imagine some of
I
that
read
happens.
more manga than comics, and I feel like manga has such a wide variety of character types and stories as well. And I wonder how much people think about American comics and think American comics are superheroes. So if you don't want to read superheroes, you think manga might be your only choice or something. Like you mentioned Chainsaw Man, it's like a guy's head as a chainsaw blade. Like I love 70s manga particularly. Like one of my favorites is like, you know, Cat-Eyed Boy, which is this crazy little cat character, like in horror comics. Junji Ito is massively popular, and it's super creepy horror comics. And there are obviously tons of, you know, American horror comics, but I don't know if the overall opinion of, you know, an American reader really, I don't know if they really know that, you know, that they can have a wide variety of stories. Because I think, you know, I think Image these days has, I love Image, but I think they've got like 6% market share. So that really shows how few people are reading Image, even though they're like the 3rd largest publisher. So I wonder if just people just don't know that you can get something other than superheroes.
They know because they read Saga. So
they read Saga, that's for sure. Yeah. Well, at the same time, it was crazy. I had a friend, and his girlfriend was like, I love Saga. I love these gods and monsters. I love these stories or whatever. Like, can you recommend another comic that exists, you know, with these types of characters? And I love Hellboy. I was like, Hellboy's all gods and monsters and stuff. Like, I don't know if it's like saga, but it's the types of, mythology that you are describing. And she was like, nah. And I was like, oh, I'm going to try it. I thought it would be perfect,
Yeah. And Hellboy is a superhero book, so it's a great one, and it's not Marvel and DC. But yeah, it's just hard. I don't know why it's hard for us, and it seems unfair that it's hard for us. It shouldn't be, but that's why we have excellent librarians to help us.
But don't you think some of it has to be with the core thing that got us all in the comic books was the surprise experience of getting a book every month and not knowing what was going to be in those 20 pages. Like, that's the most basic answer of it. And yet, whenever the conversation comes up, like, there's so many, like, all of the YouTube channels that are run about comics, right, by fans are much more about the financial metrics of comics than they are ever about comics. They're always talking about, like, this sold this much or this didn't sell this much. Like, the focus is on that, where
they're old men.
Well, that's a big part of it. But I think because of that, though, we've gotten caught in this like month-to-month log jam of log lines that nobody reads, and then like make prescript like assumptions off of. Like, the Kirkman's done great with his surprise drops. So that stuff still operates, right? Like, it still works when people get the thing that they don't know they're going to get each month. And it seems like the core thing we've like.
Well, but hold on. Just to jump in on that, like, but Robert's Robert. And so anything Robert does is going to move in the direct market. Like, the other thing that doesn't exist anymore from when we were coming up was the impulse buy at the grocery store, the newsstand. Like, you got to know to go to a comic store now monthly to go buy books, no matter what age you're at. And so, like, I can tell you, as someone who does like this variant thing that we just did on Radiant Black, we had to re-FOC the issue a week ago because even after putting out all the news, all the information about it, retailers still did not match their B covers to their A covers. So if I were Robert, that is going to cut through the noise in a way more significant way than me doing it. You know what I mean? Like, right. So yes, when people realize that's what's happening, like, they can get excited about it, or at the very least, retailers can get excited about it if retailers know about it and or pay attention to it.
But that's interesting too. So then on the library side, that is what you do when you go to the library, right? You get surprised. That's why libraries work so good. Yeah. You go to the library and you check out a book, and the design of the library system is hopefully that these are always surprises to you. You checked out something maybe you weren't thinking of. So again, that's why we're so happy to have you guys. So that you're replicating the experience that Sean is talking about. That
I think Sean, I do agree with you, but I think it's also a matter of curation, and that's the other thing. Why? I mean, that's honestly why I wanted to do this panel today. With anytime it's the New York Public Library, like librarians in general. I went to ALA this year. Curation is a thing that is sorely missing in our industry right now, and there's a lot of reasons for it. Specifically in the direct market, I know for a fact, like, so many retailers are stretched so razor thin because there are so many books from so many publishers in so many different ordering catalogs. And a lot of these books don't have demand, but retailers have to be across everything, just trying to keep across all of these different, how many hundreds of titles a month it feels like. I don't know how they do it. And so to gain attention on the stuff is always a tricky battle. How do you get retailers to curate your stuff and recommend it to their customers? Are they aware of what their customers like? I don't know how many are.
I guess what I'm also saying though, Kyle, is I 100% agree with you. Trust me, doing a bunch of independent books at Image, yeah. I understand how hard it is to get through the noise. I think I'm constantly shocked, like, as much as I personally don't like to admit this, like, as Marvel and DC goes, a lot of times the industry goes. Right. And so part of me is like, I don't understand why Marvel and DC does not do the things with surprise they can do. They don't have to. If you have a Batman book, you do not ever have to release what's happening in the Batman book for it to sell month after month. Like, they don't have to actually put anything in the previews. It could just be like Batman 105, Snyder's writing it. That could be the whole statement. And like, it'll sell and you could do whatever you want in those 20 pages. And I feel like people would start to get really excited again. Maybe I'm naive, but I'm just like.
Well, I think the other thing that has popped up a lot on YouTube that I see quite a bit is when it's not about like if this is going to be a hot book or what the resale value of this thing is going to be. The other thing that they're just recap videos. They're recap videos that explain to you the entire story. And sometimes they take the words out of the word balloons, but either way, it's like, well, here's the story in slow pan and scan down the artwork.
Right.
And so, I mean, I don't know how many people are consuming, stuff that way as well.
No, that's very true.
Well, I think mentioning Shonen Jump made a lot of sense to me as well, is that in manga, new manga particularly, there's such easy access to see what's available. It's so cheap. I think having that really low risk for people to get introduced to something is really helpful. Like, how many books have existed on, say, Webtoons or whatever, gotten a following of millions, and then later on, once they've got a big chunk of it done, finally printed it, and it's this comic that us ding-dongs have never heard of, but it's flying off the shelves. You go to a store, I've never heard of this book, but everybody wants it. And it's because it was online first, and it was free. So people didn't have to risk anything to read it, and they fell in love, before they had to risk putting down, money, and so Shonen Jump at, costing you cents or Webtoons or something, so people are loving comics, reading comics. It's just not, it's just asking a lot these days for people to like just take a risk and fork over a fistful of cash for it.
I mean, I was in a Barnes and Noble outside of Philadelphia 2 days ago, and the end cap for Lore Olympus is huge. I mean, it's a great example of what Andrew's talking about, like a Webtoon series that has transcended into millions of copies sold, probably. Now that's a different model, like how they release those books, how they make them, and everything is different than we can do in kind of traditional publishing. But there's something to be said for going to fish where the fish are.
Yeah.
But the library is a great place for them because it's free. It's as free as Shonen Jump. And we have it in the US. So keep people going to the library and checking out books, superhero books for kids, all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thanks, everyone. To region, every branch is different. I do want to plug, because you did mention like getting these like webcomic series. Definitely hit up Kinokuniya, the Kinokuniya Japanese bookstore while you're here for Comic-Con. It's right across the street from Bryant Park on 6th Avenue Broadway. And you can definitely see, like, it's massive, but also you can see the collection of web stuff that they have. Highly recommend checking out The Boxer and Solo Leveling if you haven't already started reading those. We are over time, but we still have like maybe 1 or 2 more questions left. I know Tabrisia is like hungry and wants to, and we want to give you guys back the rest of your afternoon.
I'm hungry. I'm shut. I'm not hungry. What are we talking about?
I'm but I wanted to just ask, wanted to end on, we weren't talking about anything super heavy, but kind of wanted to end on a lighter note with these last 2 questions. The first question is, who would you guys love to see battle your own characters? Like, who in the Radiant would they beat the crap out of Batman, Superman? Who in Headlopper would like kick Spider-Man's butt? Or any type of character? Who in like your original character versus an established character? Who would you like to see? Who would win? Each of you have a minute, maybe.
All right. Well, if I could do Local Man, I would bring in Nightwing because I love writing that character and it's really fun to do. But also the sidekick done good versus the superhero who lost everything, I think would be entertaining. And people like Nightwing because he's sexy and he's cool. So I could just draw covers with his butt and everybody would be happy.
I think for Headlopper, I'd want him to fight someone that would have a tough neck. So maybe like someone that would be he'd have to really get strategic about who is fighting or whatever. But also, I guess since I'm writing Godzilla, I don't know if we've ever seen like Godzilla versus Gamera. These two classic. I know I was gonna say like Godzilla versus Ultraman, but we kind of saw that. That's kind. But I could see Gamera. Like
Why can't Godzilla and Headlock? Godzilla's got a nice thick.
It's gonna be a long sword. Yeah, he's gonna have to figure that one.
Yeah, I want to read that.
That's like an airplane wing for a sword. You got to get.
Yeah. Oh, dude. Or the new 52, or the new 52 Deathstroke sword, which was comically large.
I think for me, I would take. I have a character named Red in this book, Coyotes. I did that. I'd love to see her fight with Harlequin. I think it'd be funny and I would just dig it.
Gosh, I don't know. With Radiant Black, we did talk about doing stuff as a surprise. We actually did an issue of Radiant Black where he goes up against his greatest challenge yet, creative license. And there's an unauthorized YouTube fan film being made, like a death battle, who would win in a fight between Radiant Black and Blaze from a book I did in 2014 called Cowl, that was based on a film I made in college back in 2007 about a superhero labor union in 1960 Chicago. So it's a little cheating, but I folded Cowl into the Massiveverse. And so in Radiant Black, not only did these events happen in the 1960s, but there were biography blockbusters made in the early 2000s that the two characters are like big fans of. So when Radiant Black actually gets hold of the script, he realizes he loses, and he ends up on the set chewing out the director and chills out when he realizes they cast Will Friedle from Batman Beyond to play him. And then he offers to do all the VFX in camera, but he has some thoughts on the ending. So a few pages later, as a surprise, there's a double-page spread. It's an ad, and when you scan the QR code on it, it takes you to a 5.5-minute fully animated short that we made of Radiant Black versus Blaze, with Will Friedle voicing Radiant Black. Christopher Carter from Batman Beyond scored the whole thing, and all the actors that played those characters in Cowl way back in 2007, they all came back and now voice them for this little animated short as well. And so we didn't tell anyone we did it either. It was just a QR code in the book. And then we promoted it like after the book came out a few days later. But beyond that, actually, Sean, I think we got to figure out a Massiveverse Spawn event, because we also did that as a tag at the end of this year's Supermassive. There's a medieval Spawn appearance. And so I definitely want to see a Rogue Sun Spawn throwdown.
Be very cool.
Awesome. Thank you. Super last question, and then we can give you back the rest of your day. What are you looking forward to at Comic-Con if you're going? And if you are going, where can we find you and or your work? Where will you be so we can come say hi?
I will be.
Sorry, I was gonna say I will not be there, so I will pass that over to the other three.
Yeah. So I'll be in Artist Alley at table L11 with the Felix Comic Art group. And what I'm looking forward to most is the same as every New York Comic Con. It's just such a big show that people, creators that I love and I'm friends with from Europe and from South America, it's worth them making the trip. And so there's always people at New York Comic Con that I don't see anywhere else. So, I mean, as much as I'm excited to sell my comic Snarlagon, that's always the best part, is that everybody comes out for New York Comic Con. It's just too big to fail.
Totally.
I'm in Artist Alley D30, and I am looking forward to, for me, again, the show's big and it's the enthusiasm for comics. It's Artist Alley at that show is the busiest part of the convention, which is incredible. A whole lot of shows, the floor is usually more busy with the publishers and with the toy companies and movie studios. And so here it is the people who make comics who draw the most attention. And I love it. And I always feel recharged after I leave, even though I've just spent a week in New York City, which is not recharging. So be very excited to see all of the people who go to the library and check out our books as well.
Yeah. I'll be at, I'm actually in 2 locations at the show. I'm going to start each day in Artist Alley. I have a table at H38. And so I'll be signing there from 10 to 11 a.m. And then from 6 to 7 p.m. each day in Artist Alley. But where I'll be the rest of the time, we actually have a booth for Black Market Narrative, my company, my creative collective. And that's on the main show floor. It's booth number 3810. And what you can't see, because I wouldn't subject you to it, is the dozens of boxes behind me. So I've brought in like 6 of our life-size cardboard cutout characters from the Massiverse. We have big banners, over 2,000 copies of our books here, all the trades. We're going to be doing 1 for 20, 3 for 50. Gorgeous enamel pins. Like, we're giving away free copies of Supermassive 2022 from last year, which has 12 pages of back matter, like the old like Marvel handbook, like introduction to characters. Like, we did that for the Massiverse, so you can see what every series is. And all the creative teams are here as well. A lot of them flew in from Italy and from Australia. So we'll be doing signings throughout the show. And then Friday night, this is the thing I'm probably most looking forward to. We like to do these like live events. So we're actually doing a Massiverse meetup at Barcade down in Chelsea here on 24th Street. So it's open to whoever, and first game is on me. So please come out. Tim and Andrew, if you guys are around Friday night, would love to see you. It's going to be like 8:30 p.m. on. Bring whoever. Sean, please fly in for this. Everyone else here, you're welcome to come. And yeah, we're trying to kind of spread the word a little bit, and also just celebrate not only comics but create our own superhero books.
Awesome. We actually, there's a strong possibility that we can check it out.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
In the city on Friday for work-related things, but yeah, we can definitely check it out.
If you're able to make it, Matt Groom and Erica Diurso are both going to be there. They do Inferno Girl Red, and Matt flew in from Australia and Erica flew in from Italy. They would love to talk to you about YA superhero books and what they're planning on Inferno Girl. We just wrapped the Kickstarter for book 2 a few weeks ago, and we hit our goal, and so that's officially happening. We'll also have some pretty rare hardcovers for Inferno Girl book 1 at the show, in a gorgeous virgin hardcover cover. This is like an Image exclusive that we brought in for this, so we'll be selling those at the booth and everything. But I may bring one of those for you guys if you're gonna happen to make it out on Friday night.
Oh, I'm there. And also you have at enamel pins, which I'm always on the hunt for when I go to cons.
Awesome.
I always buy drinks for librarians, so if you see me there, ask for one. Drinks for librarians. We should all do the same. Keep librarians well hydrated, because they do so much work for comics. So thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you all.
I told a little bit. We are done with our questions, but I did tell a little bit of a fib. I'm gonna toss it back to Tabrija, because we do have like our closing little spiel, and then you will be free, I promise.
Don't worry. Is very, very quick. Okay. And when Google decides to be okay, there we go. So we had an amazing conversation, and it was just so great to talk to our presenters, and most of their books are available to check out in our library. They're available in digital and in print format, so make sure we're going to put the links to the cataloging records for that are with our panelists, and those will show all the listings of all the books that they have in their collection. But we definitely want to highlight these, because not only because they're Image Comics titles, but these are really great books to start with. So definitely go and check them out. And please join us tomorrow for our final comic creator talk. We will be talking with Charles Soule and Ryan Brown. We'll be talking about comics, libraries, and their upcoming releases. It's going to be a very exciting author talk. This will be happening early in the morning at 10:30 a.m. So hopefully you'll be able to join us. It's a great way to start your day. And we're going to put the registration link into the chat. So thank you, Kyle, Tim, Sean, Andrew. This was just an amazing conversation. And thank you to everyone who was able to attend this afternoon. I hope that you're already pumped for Comic-Con. I know I am. And this is like, but we have one more session. And this was just an amazing conversation. We will be sending out the recording for this panel discussion when it's uploaded on our website. But please, thank you so much for taking the time out of your afternoon to join us today. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And we hope to see you at New York Comic Con.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.